Hey guys, welcome to the Wednesday wrap up. I'm here with the infamous or famous, it depends how you want to put it, Z-Man. Welcome, Z-Man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's been a wild week with all the the tariff stuff and the stock market going up and down, and people bankers headed to the ledge, get ready to jump, and then don't jump, it's all back again, and they all run back in and
I
try and
know. I was like hoping they would jump. I was hoping they would jump, but sadly that didn't happen. So,
yeah.
yeah, it was a
The best protest ever was that guy back I think like in 2000 who stood outside of I think it was Citibank holding the sign up that said "Jump, you bastards, jump." When the stock market went down.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The people that used to be part of Occupy Wall Street now are defending Wall Street. It's a very interesting change how that has happened. And guys, thank you for being here. We do this every Wednesday night, and we appreciate your support. And just to remind you, we do split the revenue here, and that helps encourage us to keep us going. There's a few ways you can do this. There's YouTube has super chats, Rumble has rants. There's power chats right here. You can send them anytime. And then the stream elements has a tip feature. And how we do this, because we kind of get in a roll talking, I will take all your super chats and rants at the near the end of the show, and don't worry, we will get to them. But you go ahead and send them in now, and then we will discuss it. And tonight's topic, Z-Man suggested this, and this was a couple days ago, and everything's been wild since then. Considering about the economy and tariffs. And Z-Man, it was really weird because it's almost like a lot of my prep I had went out the window based on I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Either Trump blinked and he got spooked by the market, or this was all a fancy 4D chess plan, like his press secretary said, and the Treasury secretary saying, "Oh, we were just seeing who would side with us, and we wanted to isolate China." So, and the tariffs, just you guys, just I'm sure you're aware, but Trump put on really heavy tariffs on all nations, especially like China, and it created an uproar. And then just today, Trump has paused, at least for 90 days, whatever that means, the tariffs on all countries or additional tariffs, except for China. I think he kept adding more to the tariffs of China. At this point, I don't know what it really matters. But China, yeah, Walmart gets a lot of stuff from China. A lot of factories here get Chinese parts. So this could have a huge impact. But the market loved it when Trump announced that around noon today. The markets, I think it was the highest gain ever for the start market in one day. Bitcoin went up. So Z-Man, kind of walk us through what's happening here. What is Trump doing? Is this just about China, or is it about other nations, or does he even know, or does he have some secret plan we're not aware of?
Well, the pause is actually they've just reduced everybody to 10%. All right, so it's going
Yeah.
to be a new 10% tariff, which is a really very shrewd bit of jujitsu when you think about it. Everybody's celebrating. If he just implemented a 10% tariff, everybody would be all pissed off in the markets and all this
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
With
they would have
10% stuff.
bombed. Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it really is just kind of the classic sort of, well, hey, you know what? I was going to beat the hell out of you, but I'm just going to kick you in the groin a few times. All right. Thank you for
Yeah.
kicking me only in the groin. I mean, it really is, but it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of classic Trump in a way, in that he loves this kind of back and forth. I mean, it's just his nature. He enjoys it. And I do think that there is some, a lot of this was just putting a lot of dust in the air to conceal the fact that we're going to economic war with China. I mean, that is very clear, and that's not a small thing. Look, the Chinese currency is not in trouble, but the Chinese are worried about it, and they're dumping dollars right now to try and buy up the Chinese currency, because the Chinese currency is starting to have some trouble. And a lot of this, I think, is just a distraction to keep people occupied with other stuff, when in fact we're in an economic war, and perhaps planning for an actual shooting war with the Chinese. I mean, this is one thing the Trump administration is very clear about from the very beginning. And they just got which is Eldridge Colby. He's the assistant secretary of state now, and he's not just a China hawk. I think he hates the Chinese people at a visceral level. I mean, he really has a hard on for the Chinese. And, everything's pointing to this a very aggressive approach to the Chinese. And Trump, look, he's made it clear many times that his hope is that to pry the Russians away from the Chinese. I think this is all part of that plan. So I think in the end, the big tariff wave was in part a little camouflage, a little smoke and mirrors. But I also think, they're not wrong in saying that a lot of countries stepped forward and said, we'll make a deal. Let's do a deal with the United States. Okay. I mean, no one would be offended by that. I think it's perfectly reasonable to do a deal. The Vietnamese, they jumped up and said, well, hey, we'll do zero tariffs. And Trump said no. And the reason he said no is because, well, that doesn't really help us. Well, they'll come to some sort of deal. Okay, that's fine. Because as it stands right now, it's nearly impossible for the United States any American company to sell anything into Vietnam. It just doesn't happen. It's a closed economy, and they're doing it to try and boost their local industry. And they make sneakers for Nike and Adidas wear and stuff. I mean, in Vietnam, there's actually like buildings that are all just people sitting around hand making sneakers. People don't realize this. Sneakers are actually, they're handmade, but they're handmade by people who are living, like cavemen. But with Canada, for example, very easy to make a deal. There should be zero trade barriers between the United States and Canada. But you can't trust the Canadian government. They've been gaffing us for 30 years, violating the spirit of NAFTA. And they, we know that a lot of fentanyl flows through Canada. They turned a blind eye to this stuff. We know that they've helped the Chinese finagle our zero trade policies with Canada. The Canadian government's been screwing us for a while. Well, okay, then we can't make a deal with you. So we'll, if we have to, we'll seal the damn border. But eventually the Canadians will have to come around. But that's all good stuff. This should happen with every country or entity in the case of the EU. And it's a good thing. We should all be happy with this. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be rough. It's going to be difficult. It's taken at least 40 years to get to this mess. But we're slowly moving to economic nationalism. All of a sudden, the conversation has moved away from, hey, line go up, you have to be happy because line went up, to, is this in the best interest of the United States? Is this the best interest of the American people? We've seen is a huge change in how we talk about trade. That's the first step. Now, in a couple of years, every congressional candidate, every Senate candidate, everybody's going to have to talk about, hey, I'm in favor of trade with Canada, only if, we get a special deal on hockey pucks and we'll get to sell them more apple pies. That's what we want to see. It's the first step along the way. So it's going to be a wild ride. And, and it doesn't help that Trump is the consummate showman. He had a blast this week. I mean, he was really enjoying it. And look, they sent us a message to the bankers. When Bessent came out and said, hey, look, for 40 years, the bankers have all been getting rich. Now it's time for Main Street to get rich. That was a sign, hey, guys, we need you to fall in line. And if you don't, well, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, there's so much to discuss here I thought about beforehand. And you brought up something I haven't really thought too much about, but you brought up the geopolitical angle and potential conflict with China. Is Trump trying to do? It's interesting. It's like hearkening back to our old shows of Nixon, because who went to China? Nixon. And what was one of the reasons to do that? Back in the day, they had something they called the China card, if you're familiar with that. What they were trying to do, the United States, as part of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was our big enemy. And we were trying to spin China a little bit to be on our side. And that was it was part of the strategy of the Cold War. And now it's almost like it's inversed, right? Where now Trump is trying to make friends with Russia, wind down that crazy war in Ukraine so he can focus on China. Is Trump trying to divide China and Russia? Because China and Russia seem pretty damn close right now. And I don't know if he can really divide that relationship. Is that part of the reason of the tariffs here, specifically on China, and part of the reason he's not that interested in the whole Ukrainian business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it for sure. And look, it's a fool's errand. Back in the Cold War days, the Russians and Chinese had a disputed border. They had a lot of things that they were.
Yeah, they had a border skirmish at one point, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and people forget that this was back, I think it was in the Nixon years, where the Russians talked to the Washington and said they wanted to nuke Beijing. And we told them we wouldn't sit by for that. That would be a red line. So, I mean, oddly enough, I mean, we could have, our problem with China could have been solved a long time ago. But the Russians and the Chinese, having spent 30 years watching us do regime change, they're not falling for that. They're not going to split apart. There's no wedge to be driven there. However, I do think we have a very serious problem with China. I have clients that do business in China. I have a fair amount of knowledge about doing business in China and how to export to China. And, for the longest time, going back to the 1990s, really, we've accepted this terrible one-way relationship with trade with China on the theory that, hey, they'll get rich, then they'll get democratized, and they'll overthrow the commies, and they'll be just like us, Well, that didn't happen. I mean, it clearly didn't happen. China is going to remain China. It's a 5,000-year-old society. It's not going to change. And as a result, we have this ridiculous relationship. If you want to try and sell product into China, it is such a pain in the ass. There's a million pieces of paper. It's not just the tariffs. They administrate you to death. And you have to have agents inside the country who will help you facilitate things. I mean, that's true in a lot of countries. It's true in Mexico. It's true in Eastern Europe. But, and a lot of this stuff is a form of workfare. If you do business in Mexico, for example, you have to hire tax attorneys because no one outside of Mexico could possibly understand the tax code. They brag about it being Byzantine. I mean, that's just how screwed up it is. And I actually spent a fair amount of time trying to understand the Mexican tax code. And I came to the conclusion that there is no way to understand it. It is an impossibility. and it's deliberately so that you hire locals to pay. I mean, that's just how it is. Well, China does this too, but China does it in a very smart way to try and hobble American business that doesn't play ball with China. And by play ball, they mean move as much as your operations as possible into China. And so it's not a tariff in the strict sense of it, but it's just a very one-sided trading relationship. And look, it's been very bad for American business. I mean, I've had a client that moved their manufacturing to China. There was no reason for it. It wasn't like it was an improved quality of product or something like that. It's just the screwiness of doing the way that they did their business. They actually were making foundry parts. Is that it turned out to be cheaper, even including the shipping and all the other stuff to go through, to let the Chinese basically make their product. So they, for the most part, they turned over their IP to China, to a Chinese company. And it's constant like that. These shakedowns where, hey, we can make it for you cheaper, but you have to give us all of your IP. Well, a lot of companies do it because it's a quick buck, and that's just how it goes. But I mean, we've got medicine. I mean, I think last time I checked, I think it was back in COVID. You probably remember this. Was it like penicillin or something? I mean, it was, various medicines are all made in China now.
Exactly. That was a problem. And so it's a national security risk. That was another problem. And when you outsource all your industries, and if you're making all your semiconductors in Taiwan that could be taken over by China, the military could be at risk. So that's one of the issues.
That's right. There was a missile that we make that all the printed circuit boards are made in China. It's like, well, wait a second. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, so, I think, we kind of tied it all together. I think, there's part of this dream of splitting Russia and China, and who knows, it could possibly happen. I mean, look, Russia and China are not the same place. Yeah, they are clearly, Russia is more European than it is Asian, for sure. And and the Russians are very practical people. If it's a better deal to be on the side of the United States in the long run, then that's what they'll do. I mean, that's just how it is. But the bigger problem is that we have this very, very bad relationship with China, and it's going to suck. Look, I mean, if it wasn't for the China operation, Walmart probably doesn't exist. And
Yeah, that was my next question to you, because we have these huge tariffs now on China, and there's so much that we import from China. And not only, so you could have an American business, you can be made American, but some of the parts you get or the materials come from China, and you just can't repurpose that overnight to build a new factory in the United States. So what's going to happen with Amazon and Walmart in the short term and even the long term? Is the goal to, and this is what I really don't know, is the goal, Trump's goal, to reindustrialize the heartland, so we have factories again in Ohio and Indiana, that sort of dream? Or is this just a bargaining chip he's using with China, saying, hey, don't play games, allow us to get into your markets too so we can export? Which do you see this is at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I think, the problem is, our rich people are such slime balls and so alien to us. We can't assume that they're going to suddenly get patriotic. So it's hard to know. But and I think Trump, sometimes he just dollar signs. He's very boomerish in a way.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to reduce everything to money, and it's not the issue. But at the same time, though, we have hollowed out a lot of things, like hand tools. The other day, I had to buy some files. I've got some metal files. That's some metal work to do. It's extremely hard to buy good quality metal files because all the American companies moved their operations to Mexico and China, and there are lower quality. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah,
because
definitely.
what happens? Yeah, I mean, what happens is that China will say, "Oh yeah, we'll meet your standards," and then once you get fully in bed with them, then they just lower the standards. That's how they take profit. This is a very clever trick the Chinese do. They'll lure your manufacturing in with all these incentives and all this other stuff, and it looks good, but then they immediately start gnawing away at the quality, and they will actually steal your IP and then deliberately start having the company that you're working with make a broken product to try and destroy your reputation. And then they'll come in with, the other company selling the same thing. I mean, they are just the slimiest of slime balls.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why, the expression Shanghaiing and sandbagging, they come from trying to trade in the 19th century. Sandbagging was when the Chinese would take tea casks and put bags of sand in the middle of them so that they seemed heavier than they were, because they charge by the pound. I mean, these are. I mean, it's just the Chinese nature. They look at round eyes as people to exploit. That's all they look at. We're just talking monkeys to them. And once you get that in your head, you kind of understand what the problem we have in here is, that all of our rich guys went over there thinking, oh yeah, they're just like us, and the Chinese are looking and saying, these guys are suckers. We're going to steal everything they have.
Yeah, I even experienced that in the business world. When I was young, my boss talked about a Chinese handshake, and I'm like, well, what's that? He said, it means when they shake your hands and agree to a deal, it doesn't mean they're going to follow through like Americans. It's a Chinese handshake. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, yeah, that is definitely, they have done very unethical business practices. But, okay, so we got these heavy tariffs now on China. China seems to be digging in their heels. They're throwing tariffs on our products. We do have mostly like energy products and maybe soybeans or something that go into China. We do have some products that go into it. But China, they're trying to brag like we're just not dependent on America. We have our own domestic industry in the rest of the world. Is that true? Are they willing to get into a full-fledged trade war? And who will blink first? Will China blink because they'll destroy their economy? We're their biggest customer. Or will political pressure start to get on Trump and his administration? I know there's a lot of euphoria today, stock record high or record increase. But then all of a sudden, once all various places like Amazon can no longer get toys cheap, or they're very expensive, will there be a pushback for Trump to try to claw back the tariffs because he's under political pressure by the media and the Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think, I mean, look, I'm a bit of a China skeptic, and the reason is that I've had experience doing business in China. they are so unbelievably dishonest. I mean, they're not Indians, but I mean, they're in the neighborhood. I mean,
Yeah.
and I mean, look, I've done business in Eastern Europe as well, and that's amazingly corrupt. I did business in Ukraine before the war, and I mean, and that was a shocking degree of corruption in Ukraine. But China, they're so being dishonest is just such a part of who they are. It's impossible to separate it from who they are, and so I think it's a hard read on what they're really doing. I think there's some bluffing there, but I'm very skeptical about China's ability to withstand a genuine trade war with the United States, because I think their banking system is completely riddled with fraud. Their real estate market is a complete joke. It's all fake, and and I think they have not been able to create the kind of domestic demand to support their manufacturing capacity. They have too much manufacturing capacity. So I think they probably understand this, but I think the Chinese are looking at the United States and saying, "Look, it's a land full of cowards. They don't. Their people just go along with all these things, and why should we be afraid of these guys? They're a toothless paper tiger, and they're not wrong about it. We are a toothless paper tiger. We're getting our asses handed to us in Ukraine. We spent probably a hell of a lot more money than what we're saying, and it's been a complete failure. And we can't even beat up the Houthis. We've spent $1 billion now dropping bombs on the Houthis, and the Houthis are laughing at us. They're doing like the scene from Braveheart where they're pulling up their little sheep things and waving their butts at us. So I mean, I think I think if it really got serious, I think that the Chinese would buckle. They'd have no choice. But I think the Chinese are not wrong in suspecting that there's certain people who run our financial system who don't really care about the health and welfare of the American people, and will put a lot of pressure on Trump to buckle and to take the knee to the Chinese. So it's a tough call. I mean, it's going to be fun kind of watching it, because I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how it's going to turn out. It's like a film I haven't seen before, which is a rarity in politics.
And from your business point of view, what are business leaders thinking right now? Are they thinking, because if I was a business leader and I didn't care about morality or America, I'd be like, well, maybe I need to relocate to America, but maybe I should wait and see. Maybe this will all blow over and we'll be back the way we were. And do I want to make an investment to build a factory in America when this may be over in 6 months and we're back to business as usual? Or are we having right now a fundamental change, which I suspect? And again, it's funny how we did one of our early shows about Nixon, and I know you're aware, but during Nixon, there was a crisis too. Boy, there's a lot of parallels, right? Nixon, he came in, there was a war he wanted to get out of that he didn't start, that we needed, what the phrase was, peace with honor or something like that. They were trying negotiations with the North Vietnamese, the communists, and it was costing us a lot of money. Now, what do we have with Ukraine? And Nixon ran into a problem with the Bretton Woods, and the dollar was tied to the gold. And all of a sudden there was, as you said, like the French were trying to exploit that and take our gold by turning in their dollars. And so he got us off the gold standard, and we got onto the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. It was a fundamental change in our country at that time. And really that was the start when we started to run a lot of deficits. Really at that point, it kind of started, and it allowed it, because if the dollar is a reserve currency, you can spend more than you take in, and you don't get the hyperinflation because the money is soaked up elsewhere. And we've been running that model for a long time, most of my life. And the question is, can we still run that model, or did we finally, I think there was just fundamental problems with the deficit. Now our interest is more than we pay on national defense. What's that, like $1 trillion our budget's going to be? So I think there's a fundamental change that has to happen. Just like after World War II, the Bretton Woods changed, and then the Nixon and getting off the dollar off gold to the petrodollar. Are we into a new change here that's fundamental, that it has to happen? Do you see it in that sense, a restructuring of the world? You kind of alluded to that we're getting back to economic nationalism. And the whole idea of globalism, which I think was like the John Lennon song, let's imagine there's no countries and there's just like the World Trade Organization, everyone moves around. Because part of globalization is just not trade, it's free movement of people. And is this whole project now starting to unwind?
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to the fact. I mean, Trump's been in office almost 3 months now, and he has done things with the stroke of a pen that I didn't think I'd ever see. I mean, I just didn't think it was possible. And I mean, he's firing tens of thousands of government workers. I mean, he's just firing people. I mean, and look at the pushback. They last weekend they had this highly orchestrated stand up, and it was a lame. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, you saw the. I mean, they tried to make it look like there was all this huge thing, but they always fake the video.
Right.
But when you actually saw some of the real clean video, you're like, there's not a lot of people there. And it's because the elites are not behind any opposition to this. And so I do think I keep coming back to this. I sound like some sort of deep state conspiracy theorist, but I do think that Wall Street, particularly, had gotten very concerned with the imbalances in the American budget and in dollar flows. And I think the conclusion was something has to change. The government has to be stripped down. We have to rethink our trade policy with China, particularly. But it's also the threat of de-dollarization. I think that really spooked a lot of people because, all of a sudden, when we took Russia off the dollar, and the Russians said, "Okay, you want to buy our stuff, you got to do it in rubles, and you have to go buy rubles," and it didn't crash their economy. I think that terrified everyone in Wall Street and London and Paris and Frankfurt and every Western financial capital. I think they looked and said,
and Trump, because you remember early on, Trump had a big thing with Putin. You better not get off the dollar, start your own currency or BRICS. And they never really totally talked about really getting their own currency separate from the dollar, but they've been hinting about it. And Trump was really upset about that. And I think that was a clue what's important to Trump. And I think you're right. That was an own goal because we thought we could treat Russia like they were a dissident, would just sanction them and deplatform them off all these, social media. And they'd be canceled and there'd be a revolution and we would have gay pride parades now in Moscow. But that didn't happen. Actually, they became pretty strong because I think they bought their propaganda. They are just a gas station, masquerading as a country. But actually, they have a lot of industry and they're fairly sophisticated. And so I do think that all of this, I agree with you. I think they realize that we have some serious problems economically even before the tariffs. And I think Trump thank God we have him. He's going to help navigate through this. Now, whether it works or not, I don't know, but I don't know any other way to do this. And I'm not really sure if he can, what the impact will be. And one of the things I've noticed, just reading online and talking to people, we had my roundtable last night, there's a real divide between and I'm like you, I don't like this generational warfare, but it seems like a lot of the boomers, lack of a better term, they love their 401ks and they're really upset about anything that goes down. And the younger guys are like, "What? We don't give a damn about your 401ks. We can't get a job. When you were young, we had all the industry here. You could, hit the pavement and get a good paying job, even if you didn't have a college education. That's going away now. And you're discriminated against if you're white, even if you go to." So these kids, they did everything right. They went to college, they got a big debt, and they got good grades, but they can't get their foot in the door. So I do see a lot of, at least in my sphere, a generational divide about these tariffs, which is ironic because Trump was older. But have you seen that too? And I think we do need a change so we can provide opportunities for younger people.
Yeah, it's funny. The boomers I talk to, their response was, market goes up, market goes down, market goes down.
Yeah.
They've seen a million times, I mean, I think to some degree, it's kind of I found it hilarious that all of a sudden all these kooks, these people who are self-described socialists and anarchists and stuff are all of a sudden all trying to, oh my God, he's hurting the stock market,
Yeah, I know.
I mean, my Lord, but yeah, I mean, I think my hunch is that older people do not really appreciate the hostility that comes from younger people. I don't think they experience it very much. I mean, their kids aren't telling them that they want to kill them, or not chasing them around with a pillow in their hands. But they're not really big on internet life and online life. But young people are not wrong about this. I mean, look, we've gone through this great technological revolution, right? Where massive gains in efficiency, things that were unheard of. I mean, dwarfs what happened in the Industrial Revolution. And yet a husband and wife with children today work harder and have less free time than they did 40 years ago. Well,
Right.
Wait a second. How come they didn't get the benefit of this? How come when I was a kid growing up, my family was poor, but my father could still provide a roof over our heads with his paycheck. He could still do that, and my mom could stay home. And all the other kids now, starting somewhere in the 70s, divorced it, liberal, all the stuff, the usual suspects unleashed the tidal wave on us. But by the time you start getting into the 80s, you start noticing that middle class people, well, mom's got a career, she doesn't just have a job to add some extra money to the kitty. It's a career because they have to have it. And then as you move along, all of a sudden, mom and dad are working 50, 60 hours a week. You include a commute and all the other stuff. Well, that's not better. That's not better than before. I mean, sure, you got better stuff. But I think a lot of people would, if they were honest about it, they'd say, yeah, you know what, maybe I don't need a toaster that I can control with my iPhone. I can live without that. I can live without a lot of this stuff. And of course, we're poorer in a way we don't realize, not just in spiritual sense, but think about all the ways in which companies try to tax us. If you told my father when I was a little kid that one day you would pay $100 a month for television, he was, what are you talking about? Television is free. Right. I got an antenna. I was on a roof all weekend. Don't tell me I got to pay for it. You thought that was crazy. I mean, I saw a video the other day where a guy bought a Bosch dishwasher, and to use it, he had to download the app to his mobile device and then connect to the Bosch service in order to run his damn dishwasher. And guess what? It comes with a fee. He's being taxed to wash his damn dishes. It's just nuts. I mean, and the car makers are doing this. So we're living in a weird sort of technological feudalism on top of the fact that we're all working harder and not really staying ahead. So I think the economy over the last 30, 40 years has been really crappy to a lot of people, except the old people. They really did ride the wave. There's no question about it. They got their houses went up in value, and the interest rates went down at the right time, and the stock market went up. It was a great time to be a boomer.
Yeah, I don't blame them, but everything just went their way. And as you said, because we've had a lot of asset increases in valuation, and because people, they have all this extra money because of how we run the deficit and all this money slushing in, and people invest in the stock market and in housing, land, and even stuff like artwork. And I almost feel like that's like a bubble that needs to pop somehow. That it's not really, it's good. Yeah. If you're a boomer and you bought your house for $100,000, now it's worth $800,000, you feel rich, but it's pricing out the younger generation from being able to start families. And I think that has, as you said, it's just not dollars and cents. It's it's bad in general in other ways. And we have a real split politically. And this is where left and right's getting very confused, because your traditional libertarian types like Rand Paul, they think tariffs are bad because that's just what they believe. Tariffs are always bad. We got to have free markets. That's the Milton Friedman. We got to do that. And Ben Shapiro was kvetching about that because his special country got tariffs. Did you see that when Trump was meeting with Netanyahu? It's so hilarious. Netanyahu, he put a tariff on Israel. And then he just slapped Netanyahu on the knee and said, well, you got to remember, Ben, we give you billions of dollars a year. And you got to admit, hey, good for you. You've done that well. Kind of wink and nod. It was kind of funny. And Netanyahu was just glaring at him. So, yeah, there is that aspect of it. And I just don't, anytime you go through a restructuring of the economy, it could be very difficult because people have grown accustomed to how to live, especially the top. Like the top 10% own the stocks and they're doing extremely well. The other people aren't doing so well. I mean, you have like the Dow at 40,000, but you have people that are lining up at food banks. Something has gone fundamentally wrong. And I think J.D. Vance and Trump, they really understand that. And Pat Buchanan did. But then you have not just the people on the left, like you said, Bernie Sanders used to be for tariffs now because, Trump bad. But you also have the libertarian types that think that tariffs are bad, that are part of the so-called right. So it's a really divisive issue, and it's going to be interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think old people have really much to worry about at all as a general proposition. I mean, obviously there's old poor people too. I mean, that's, true.
Sure.
But I think, frankly, I mean, our generation, we're probably the ones going to get screwed the most in a way, because there's a good chance they're probably going to put some clamps on Social Security so that, they can't do anything about the boomers because they're too big a voting bloc, but, they can put limits on us. And, I mean, that's just the way it is. But I think, we have to restructure the economy so that people benefit from the collective prosperity. I mean, look, there's simple little things like this. If you go to Russia or China and you need to transfer money, let's say I needed to give you some money for something.
Mm-hmm.
I would just pull up my phone app, put your email address in or your phone number and send you money. There would be no fee involved because we pay this through our other taxes. This is just a part of how the system works. Here in the United States, you get screwed every time you move money around. If you give it to yourself, you wind up getting paying a fee sometimes. And it's little things like that, and it's because both Russia and China really do operate under economic nationalism. They say, look, the whole point of the economy is to benefit the people as a whole. And so the leaders who have a connection to the people because they're the same people, they think in those terms. We don't do that in the United States. Every time we have some new innovation, there's some clever guy thinking, how can I screw my neighbor with this? How can I squeeze a few dollars out of him? How can I steal from him with this new innovation? It's a really different culture, and we've got to abandon that. And this is a very novel thing. I mean, this is not the way things always were. And so I think it's, this whole trade war and all the other stuff is really about trying to shift the debate away from, I got mine, screw you. I know that this kind of dog eat dog economy that America has had for the last 40 years or so, to one in which we think, what's in the best interest of the United States as a whole? Look, if someone said to me that my poor neighbors here in West Virginia will do a little bit better if I don't do better, I say flatlined, I'm not opposed to that. I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah.
There's a social capital here. I've made this point a million times. I would much rather have more expensive lawn care and be able to go into an emergency room that doesn't look like a damn Tijuana bus stop. It doesn't have chickens running around and freaking goats and stuff.
I love that. I love that expression you use. I will definitely steal it because it is true. And I thought the same way. Instead of like necessarily Walmart, if you could have local stores do it, even if it was a nickel cheap, more expensive for a widget, I'm okay with that. But you get people like Ben Shapiro. It's all about dollars and cents and getting every penny. And I think there's a little bit more to life than that. But the interesting
there's another thing here, though, is that Ben Shapiro doesn't look at me or you as his fellow citizens.
Right.
And he doesn't look at this as his country. This is just where he happens to be at the time. He's assigned here by his cult, and that's it. At some point he dreams of going home and, being with his people. And I don't fault him for that. I really don't. I fault us for allowing this to perpetuate. That's the problem, And look, it's weird. I bring this up a lot. The United States and Russia have a lot in common. Actually, Putin gave a speech about this. And he didn't talk about Ben Shapiro, but it kind of hinted at it a little bit, because if you look, both the United States and Russia have tremendous natural resources. We also have great demand for natural resources. We're also kind of two civilizations that are excluded from the beautiful people in Europe. We're kind of oddballs in a way, and at the same time, the rest of the world counts on us. We make their food, we make their stuff, and in a lot of ways, the Russians are a little ahead in that they took control of their own societies and they run it for them. They're running their society for the benefit of Russians. We as Americans, we need to do the same thing. We need to take our society back and run it for the benefit of Americans. And that's obviously going to upset certain people, but just the way it has to be.
That sounds like Nazism or something they'll say. Yeah, that is pretty crazy. What do you make of Trump? Just says all sorts of stuff. I don't know how to take it seriously, but some of this, I don't know. He does amazing things, so I don't discount it. I think it's very clear he's a fan of McKinley, President McKinley. And McKinley had a lot of tariffs help make America prosperous. And the whole tariff bit with Trump is not new. He was talking about tariffs in the 80s. So I don't think this is a fad with them. And one of the things he brought up, because how did we fund the federal government before income tax? Well, we had tariffs. And he's talking about floating ideas like, let's get rid of capital gains. Let's get rid of even the income tax. We'll have external revenue instead of internal. He's cutting the amount of IRS agents. Yeah. And is this a possibility, or is he just throwing stuff out there to sound good? I would love a world without a income tax, but I just don't know the size of the government, how that would run.
Yeah, I mean, the Senate bill is that they just passed, quietly put together. Includes huge cuts based on all the Doge stuff and the elimination of taxes on tips and the taxes on overtime. And I don't know. I mean, look, I just did my taxes here, and when you're a self-employed person, oh, Jesus, I mean, you just get raped.
Yeah, you do.
And
yeah.
And so any relief is fine. And look, it's not just taxes either. It's all the shenanigans. We started talking about Walmart at the very beginning. That without China, Walmart wouldn't exist. Without massive subsidies from state and local government, Walmart wouldn't exist. Where I used to live, they built a big Walmart, and before they built the Walmart, they got I think a 30-year exemption for property taxes, employment taxes, income tax, corporate taxes in the state. Plus, the county built them an off-ramp from the highway and used eminent domain to claim a bunch of land and give it to them for their parking space. I mean, how can any small business, how can Fred's, haberdashery compete with that? I mean, it's an impossibility. And, this idea that, we can be a society where everybody either works or shops at a Walmart or a Target or something like that. It's clearly not a workable model. And a lot of that gets into this whole tariff business and everything else. The whole system has grown up to be rigged in favor of insiders, a small number of people who are profiting from the scheme. And, when I heard Besant said that, for 40 years, Wall Street has been getting rich, and now it's time for Main Street to get rich. That was a clear message that it's not just tariffs, it's everything. Taxes. The Trump, this is a revolution that they're staging, And look,
it's a restructuring. I think I put it up there with what Nixon did in importance.
Yeah. I mean, it could be as big as what FDR did. It could be in the end, the bookend of FDR. And look, you have liberal reporters asking the little blondie girl about whether business people will hire hitmen to kill Trump because of all these changes he's making. I mean, don't get me wrong. It brings my heart nothing but joy to hear discussion about assassinating rich people. But I mean, but the idea that that they're thinking this way just tells you how radical this agenda is.
Yeah, it definitely is, and How do you argue? Because people, and I'm okay if this happens. It may happen because the so-called free market types. I'm not trying to pick on Ben Shapiro, but he would say, or even like Rand Paul, that well, tariffs are just a tax on the consumer because if we have tariffs, everything's just going to cost more at the store, so we're going to have more inflation. Um, my take is, yeah, maybe so, but as you said, for the better social capital and maybe being able to offset our income taxes or capital gains, I'm okay with that deal. What's your take on that? Will the prices go up because of what we're doing with China?
Well, a big thing I've done in my life for the last 30 years is basic accounting, explaining basic accounting to people. I do a lot more of it now than I ever used to. And what you always want, for example, in a business, is that the expense associated with a sale should be booked in the same month as the sale. So you don't want to get all this revenue in January and then have all these big expenses in March or April, right? So you accrue these things. And the logic behind basic accounting, the basic economic model of the Western world, is that cost and revenues, cost and benefits are always linked together. They carry with one another, and you don't want them separated, because that then results in people not appreciating the fact that there is a cost to this benefit. You want this, and this applies to society as a whole. Well, if we're taxing Chinese goods because they have a much higher cost to us socially and foreign policy wise and so forth, well, then that shows up in the product. Well, that's a good thing, right? No, it's funny. All these guys who say, "Oh my goodness, tariffs are going to show up at the cost of goods." Well, so the sales taxes. You don't hear these guys complaining about that.
Right.
So this idea that these tariffs are inherently bad because they raise prices. No, what they're doing is they're shifting the cost back into the actual product. If you actually had to pay at Walmart for that $3 item that used to cost $10, if you had to pay $10 because we put back in the Tijuana emergency room, we put back in your kids full of Mexicans, we put back in the unemployed guy who's now got an opioid problem, we put all those social costs back in. Well, guess what? We wouldn't go to Walmart. Walmart wouldn't exist. And so, I'm all for shifting the cost back to where they belong, so that people, the more aware people are, the better choices they'll make. That's the crazy part about it, if you think about it. Basic economics says what we want is accurate price signals so people can get a genuine feel for the cost of their decisions. And what Ben Shapiro argues for obvious reasons, is to shift those costs away so people make decisions in a different way that benefit him, and so they don't see the actual cost of them. That's the problem with all these libertarians and Ben Shapiro types and all that when they argue about free trade. There's no such thing as free trade. There's a reason we call it trade and we don't call it free. It's called a trade-off. That's what trade is all about.
Exactly. And a lot of people like Pat Buchanan and Ross Perot, they were right. Trump said today, President Trump, that NAFTA was one of the worst trade deals ever, and he probably was right about that. And I think we're seeing definitely a restructuring. Now, my next question is this going to spill over to other countries? And what does this mean, for example, to the EU? I know we have some foreign viewers. Is the EU, or that's kind of a type of globalism, is that now threatened based on what Trump is doing? And what's the purpose of the World Trade Organization anymore if we start doing, every country has their tariffs? It could be a lot more than just to America.
Yeah, I have a feeling the Doge boys are going to be showing up at the Washington offices for like the WTO and the World Bank and stuff, and saying, yeah, because look, I have stories about like the World Bank and these offices in DC. These guys, we're running out of time, so I won't get into this. But let me just say, they start drinking at lunchtime at their desk. These are just complete patronage jobs. They're like the old days where the union would get guys to sit around in lounge chairs at the docks and that kind of stuff. That's what this is. But as far as the EU, they're screwed. They're doomed. They don't control their own energy. They don't control their own foreign policy, and they don't control their own currency. There's really no worse scenario to have than that. I have clients that have European subsidiaries, and I've been very busy over the last 3 months because guess what? We're moving that business out of Europe, particularly Germany. Anything that has to do with manufacturing is just getting out of Germany. Volkswagen is getting ready to move a whole bunch of their production into the United States, not just because of the tariffs, but because energy costs, regulatory environment, and the absolute incompetence of the political class. They're looking around saying these guys are bleeping morons. Why? There's no hope here. And I mean, it's not entirely possible. I mean, like Porsche lost $200 billion, something like that. I forget, some huge amount of money. That German cars in the United States will all be built in places like Georgia and Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, I look forward to those commercials where you say, German engineering, and you see some guy, from the backwoods of Tennessee with a thick drawl saying, yeah, I put the engine of your car together. He's got a little piece of straw in his mouth.
Who knows? I mean, Trump could be right. He's saying he's going to introduce the golden age as typical Trump language, but maybe so. He's called all this climate change, the green scam. He's releasing a lot of energy. He did something with coal, make it easier to get involved with the coal and energy. He's telling companies just what you said, come to America. You're not going to have any of this climate change energy BS like you get in Canada with their carbon tax. Come here. We have cheap energy. You'll get going, and we're going to reduce our regulations, and we're going to have a good tax environment. You're not going to get a tariff. That may work. And that could create some issues. And guys, we'll wrap up soon. We do have a few questions. I'm going to take them, but if you have questions, send them in now. So kind of winding this down, Z-Man, who do you see, what countries or in general, who are the winners and losers of all this that are happening? And it could be like a country, it could be the individual. Where do the Democrats stay in this? Are there going to be winners or losers? The Republicans, China, Korea, Europe, Russia, China. How do you see this as a winners and losers proposition based on what's happening now?
I think the losers are going to be a lot of the people. There's going to be a lot of people get blown out of Wall Street and in the banking industry who don't really do anything. There's a lot of slop there, and because those guys are going to have to retool and have to rethink about how they do things. But I think, I'm hoping that Hollywood is a big loser. I hope China follows through with that that thing. That would be just so awesome. Because look, Hollywood goes out of business if they can't sell product in China. Everybody knows this. That is the dirty little secret, because they're not only they sell the product, but they also get a lot of financing out of China. So that would just, oh my God, my heart would be an alligator. I think a winner. That's an interesting thing. I think Appalachia might be a winner. And the reason is we have a lot of capacity in Appalachia. Trump's already decided that we're going to have coal plants again. So that means we need coal mines. And that's going to change things. But there's a lot of industrial capacity that has been sitting idle for a long time that could quickly be turned around. For people who are looking to say, hey, we got to get into the U.S. quickly. Oh, wait, you have this town that's been depressed for 25 years, but they've got stuff. They have access to a highway. They have a railhead. Well, let's go set up there, and Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Western, they got tons of this stuff, Western Pennsylvania. But I think the real beneficiary is going to be the person who interviews a former government employee for a manufacturing job. That's another thing Scott Bessent said. He said, someone said, well, where are we going to get the people? He said, well, we fired all these government employees. I'm like, this is awesome. I love this guy. This is the best. This is the best Treasury Secretary ever. When he said that, it's like Pol Pot,
Yeah. And he comes from Wall Street, so he knows. So it's not like he understands all the dirty little secrets about it. So the winners could be like the red states. Do you see then like states like California could be a loser because they're not going along with the program?
I don't know. People can change quickly. Listen to Gavin Newsom. All of a sudden, he sounded like Pat Buchanan. Our thing about our political class is that they are not men with principle. These are men who will say whatever they're told.
Yeah.
And I think as long as the rich guys are all committed to this, and they seem to be. That seems to be the case. And Apple had giant cargo planes full of iPhones flying into the United States to duck the tariff scheme. you don't do that if your option A is to try and overthrow the presidency with the rest of the rich guys.
Mhm.
So I mean, I think it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. There's going to be difficulties. And look, I know in my business, I'm already facing a bit of a downturn. I've seen clients saying that, we've been in a recession for probably about a year.
Mhm.
And, that in reality, I mean, all the fake stuff, I mean,
Mhm.
everybody knows we've been in a recession. So, it's not going to be easy, but it's necessary. And I think it's, what I want to start hearing from the Trump people is that and you're getting little hints of it, is that it's our patriotic duty to, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, as a society, 'cause look, Reagan gave those speeches. You remember that when,
Mhm.
that difficult transition, and people said, okay, we'll give them a shot. We'll see what happens. And it turned out great. So let's hope that the same thing happens this time.
Yeah, and that's something that Trump is similar to Reagan. He always has a positive vision. Even if it may not happen, he lets you know, hey, we can do this. We're going to have a golden age. That was Reagan's message, unlike Jimmy Carter with the Malays in America and everything sucks. It's just going to get worse. And I see that a lot in Europe with Starmer and Macron. They're just all doom and gloom. And Canada is just a depressing place. So I think that's going to be interesting. And I think that we could have globalization. When we talk about economic topics, a lot of people are like, oh, it's kind of dry because I don't understand all the economics about it. But it also affects things like immigration because we could start to see people going back to their home countries. And because there's some of the logic is if you have open borders for capital, why not humans, right? So and that could change too.
Yeah, and look, we're one of the other things that we're going to experience here, I think, is this big push to expand and develop our energy infrastructure because of AI.
Yeah, well, big time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be powering AI with windmills, and
No.
and look, I've done a lot of testing on this. What I did is I did back-to-back tests with Gab, is AI,
Mhm.
and it's about 30% as fast as the other stuff, even though it got the same results. And it's because he doesn't have a server farm the size of a skyscraper.
Mhm.
His servers are in his basement. Well, that tells you where the world is. We're going to need
Mhm.
lots and lots of servers, lots and lots of electricity, and that means lots and lots of power production. And that's why we're going to have lots of coal plants all of a sudden. Because I mean, people don't realize we're up to our eyeballs in coal, including clean coal. There's a massive deposit of coal. I think it's in Nevada that would it's like 1,000 years of coal. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of resources bottled up in this country. So, when it comes to digging stuff out of the ground and making stuff, I think it's we are headed to a good times, at least not necessarily a golden age.
All right. And let's take some questions. So thank you guys. And there's still time to get your questions in. And as long as we get questions, we will continue. The first one was from Mark Brown 77. It was a rant. Thank you, Mark Brown. Do you think the Chinese are just as ruthless and unethical when doing business with each other, or are they just unethical to Westerners? That's actually a very good question. Do they treat each other different than they treat us?
It kind of depends. I mean, in my experience, if they're not family, not there's not some patronage relationship, then yeah, they'll screw each other over in a heartbeat. But there's a lot of connections there. It's not always clear. And, they are an inscrutable people, and so it's not always easy to figure out exactly where their loyalties lie. But they universally look at the round eye as just talking monkeys, and they take great pleasure in ripping us off.
We have a really interesting rant from Pan Hyde, and Pam, I'd like to hear more about this. But he said he lived in China and he actually and worked in a factory. Wonder how that happened. But he said it's hard to imagine outperforming them in production. The U.S. should focus on things like metals, medicine, mining, microchips, etc. Let them make the plastic shit. Um, this is kind of the idea of a division of labor of economies. I don't know. I somewhat disagree from this just because of a national security point of view. I know Britain no longer has they make steel, I think it's necessary that we should be able to do that sort of stuff. But what do you think, Z-Man? Should we just do like the higher end stuff in America and let them do the kind of primitive work still?
Yeah, the labor savings isn't as big as it used to be in China. I mean, a lot of this can be moved to Mexico. I mean, but
Or
we're
aut
really
or
talking
or
about,
or even automation here in the future too.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, really, the real savings in China is that they'll just throw all their waste into the local river. You
Yeah.
can't do that here. And look, that's a big part of it. 90% of the garbage in the Pacific Ocean comes from India and China.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's a cost to us. I mean, that shit's
Yeah.
washing up on our shores too. So I mean, it has to be a holistic look at it. And I think a lot of this, look, automation is going to be a huge part of reindustrialization. Most things like plastics and stuff don't need humans. Yeah, look, we could actually do without a lot of migrant farmers simply by investing in automation and farming. We've done this before. We made tomatoes that were easier to pick with machines. That was like in the 1950s. Said, oh, we crossbreed, the different tomato types and came up with a thicker skin, so that way we didn't need a bunch of stoop labor to pick tomatoes. We can do this stuff. It's just what's happened is that the fast money guys, the guys who just want to make a quick buck, who have no connection to us, don't think of themselves as us, they always favor, hey, let's just go find cheap labor somewhere. Let's
Right.
not invest in America.
Yeah, and when I was in the business world, because I had problems with them outsourcing American jobs, and I don't know where you work, but where I work, they said, "Well, yeah, this does kind of suck, but if we don't do it, our competitor will do it, and they'll get the savings, so we have to do it." And so that's why I think there's a function of government to saying, "Okay, if you're going to do that, you're going to get a tariff on you."
No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's absolutely true. Look, the government sets the rules, and
Mhm.
we hope sets the rules in our benefit, as a whole.
Then we got a Carl NX. He sent a super sticker. Thank you for that. No question. And Ryan, a generous donation of $20. Thank you both for understanding the plight of younger millennials, myself, and Gen Z have been faced with. You need to be making $30 an hour to have a shot, and places won't even come close to that. None of us are very disenfranchised. Most of us are very disenfranchised. So yeah, I do have. I've never been. I never wanted to be the guy when I get old that young people screw them or they're dumb. I understand you guys have a rough part of it. All generations do to some degree, but I do think you guys got kind of a short end of the stick because I said in my video today, Z-Man, that the American dream used to always be that you do better than your parents. And I remember my grandparents, they grew up near Kentucky, southern Indiana, extremely poor. They went through the Depression and they could hardly afford to eat. Then my grandfather went to Chicago, got a factory job. Then my father, Danny, he got a white collar job in one of the early computer programmers, and so he did better than them. And he had, my mother and father had Steve and myself, and we did fine. But we're getting to the point that's no longer happening now. But it's just it's kind of broken now with this generation.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, look, my career and my longevity allows me to live in a remote part of the world. I mean, if my house and my property in the Baltimore, Washington area is over $1 million,
Oh yeah,
no one can afford. I mean, who can afford that? I mean, no one could. And that's why young people can't afford homes because it gets worse for them because now that the boomers are starting to downsize, they're loading up the demand for cheap houses. So I
yeah.
mean, the Zoomers are getting double screwed here. So and that look, if we that's the problem with generational politics is it works both ways. Hating old people means that the old people who have money and influence hate the young people and don't support policies that are good for young people. And that's what's happened over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I agree. So I do have a heart for young people. Actually, I have a heart for all of Americans, no matter your age. But yeah, Ryan, how do you see the future of the EU in 10 years? In shambles, a country splitting off, etc. We kind of touched on this, but I would say that EU in 10 years, I don't know, will it still exist, or do you think it's going to be gone, Z-Man?
Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, that's such a mess. I mean, and it's not. There's no good news for those guys. So, I mean, look, any organization in which women become dominant inevitably fails. So, I mean, I think that's the way to bet. When the most strongest leader in Europe is what's her name, Georgia Bologna, the woman in Italy.
Yeah, and then you have
I
that
mean,
girl boss Ursula, well, this EU boss, right?
yeah, and then Caracol. I mean, it's just, I mean, come on, yeah, if I were a European, I would leave. I mean, that's why the people, UK is seeing an outflow of actual native Brits, and I mean, there's a large British expat community in Russia now because they said this is, Britain sucks and Russia is at least, gives them an opportunity. I mean, think about how screwed up that is. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the idea of people saying, I'm going to go move to Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I heard, you ever remember the YouTuber Sargon? He was pretty
Yeah.
famous, but I happened to run across a video of his on X, and he was talking. He visited the United States, and he was just shocked about how happy people are here and how things are just so much better than in England, and how just within 10, 15 years, things are really dreary in England now. And there's no social trust because of all the immigration and crime, and the government seems to hate the people, and there just seems to be no hope. And there doesn't seem any positive vision. The people in Europe, and I'm talking not all of Europe, but like Britain, France, and Germany, they're just buying into like, oh, we got to punish you more because your Mother Earth is going to get bad. So you're going to have, less energy, and your lives are going to be shittier and shittier. And if you get stabbed by an immigrant, well, that you better not complain, we'll arrest you. It's just really demoralizing. And little things that Trump does, people may laugh at it, but you see today he passed a resolution that we have full those water saving showers. We're not going to have those anymore. We're going to have good shower streams. And that it sounds silly, but just little things that can really improve people's life, I think, helps them. And it just seems like the government in Europe wants to do everything to make the people as miserable as possible. And I think a couple of things are going to happen are really going to shake things up. I think Russia's going to win. And by winning, I don't think that means they're going to conquer all of Europe or anything like that, but they'll have Eastern Ukraine and Crimea. And that's going to shake, I think, NATO and the EU to their core. And you're going to see the tariffs really working for America. And I think Europe is going to be in more of a financial mess because of their stupid climate change hoax stuff they're doing, making people poorer. And you're going to see a lot more nationalist parties. Already AfD now is supposedly the most popular party in Germany. Who knows? I mean, they try to ban all these parties and arrest people, but you can only do that so much. So I think Europe is going through a really tough time now, and it's pretty dark right now. All right. Morgoth 009, thank you. He's a good supporter. 777 he gave us. What is the symbolic meaning, history, and your understanding of a green door? I think Z-Man, because I turned 009 onto your site, and you have the behind the green door thing.
Well,
I'm guessing I know what that is because I was assuming you're making there was a infamous, I guess, porn movie in the 70s, Behind the Green Door. Was kind of a play on that, or do you have other symbolism behind the green door?
No, I mean, that's what it was. I mean, I just jokingly, I'm prostituting myself now. Mm-hmm. And so, it's behind the green door. But, I was in, I think, Vancouver once, and I was told that there was like a famous brothel. Someone pointed it out, and it had a green door on it. And I thought, well, there must be something about these green doors. I mean, maybe it just all comes from that movie. But anyway, yeah, that was the only reason I used the green door. It's just a joke, I'm prostituting myself. You go through the green door, and I expose myself completely to you.
Well, yeah, and also I really encourage you guys. I've said this, and no one pays me, so I just tell the truth. That's the nice thing. I'm not on USAID. I don't get an email script of what I'm supposed to post on Twitter like some people do. I don't get any of that. I'm not going to encourage you guys to drink soda, how it's healthy for you, because I'm being paid. That was funny. What happened?
Yeah, no one even bothers offering me. It's not like I get a chance to say no. I mean, it's like, what the hell am I doing wrong here? That someone says, "Hey, yeah, we want to pay you to, be a shill." I mean,
And it doesn't work anymore anyway because it's idiots. All they do, they're not even creative. Like, okay, this is basically what you want you to say, but put it in your words. They're just so damn lazy. They do copy and paste. And then people can say, hey, wait a minute, you guys are saying the exact same thing, word for word. And yeah, it's pretty cynical. Stephen Campbell, thank you. Power Chat, $10. The show keeps getting better. It's just not, I want to watch Ramsey Paul because I like Ramsey Paul, as most people's live streams are. The show itself is a great organic model. So we got a big fan there, Z-Man. So, and a lot of that obviously is Z-Man, you helping to bring that. But I do think the shows are getting better and very interesting. This was an interesting topic. And we had a lot of good interaction today. And as I always say, if you guys have suggestions, and we kind of joke, but kind of not really joking, if you want to send in a donation, if it's a big enough size, hey, who knows? Maybe we would do the topic as long as it's obviously YouTube friendly.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of fun. So,
we got one next more. Week we're going to do a show on Israel. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
we can just keep saying that, and then there'll be like 10,000 people show up, and then 5 minutes into it, they'll realize that we're not doing Israel. No, I'll leave.
I know I could do something like, okay, we're going to do a deep dive into the Holocaust. Oh my God, that just said in the ADL offices, alarm bells would be going off. Tom Cotton would finally come back to Arkansas to drag me away. It would be, yeah. No, we're not going to do a show about the Holocaust. So that's an example we won't do. It wouldn't last very long, put it that way. Not an economics question, but have Ramsey and Z-Man heard this race argument before? And thank you for this. We'll just take this briefly. So just to see this, he sent someone had a tweet on this here. It was James Lindsay. I was recently challenged in person by a young professional man on race IQ realism and my estimate. Suppose what you're saying is completely true and genetic. On a practical level, what do you do differently when faced with any individual of any race? Answer: nothing. In my case, it's not nothing. I adjust my behavior, obviously, based on not only race, but sex and age. You got to be, in my opinion, let's say, if you have a 90-year-old Jewish woman in a walker, she's probably not the same threat level as, let's say, a 19-year-old black guy. I'm just saying there's probably a different threat level there. How would you answer that, Z-Man?
Yeah, I mean, and people do this all the time. I mean, we are as segregated in terms of black and white as we were in the 1950s, and that's obviously because people prefer to be around people like themselves. I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, look, James Lindsay, I feel bad for him because he's clearly having psychological problems. He's a guy who's struggling with his mental health, and oddly, the terrible thing about this age is that he gets rewarded online for being a kook, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad in a way. I mean, I feel sorry for him. I wish some responsible people would step in and say, look, you need to get offline and get some help. I mean, modern medicine does wonders for people like that.
Yeah, I don't even follow him. I've heard of him, but I don't follow him. So he doesn't really, I just read he's canceled by both sides: pro-America, anti-communist, anti-fascist, based AF, and liberty first. So yeah, he sounds like he's trying to do both sides or whatever. I don't know. I don't know the guy that well. So yeah, that was kind of a silly argument he made. Yeah, Z-Man, it's been a really great show. Before we leave, I always tell people that to read your content. I read it every day. Where can they find you?
You can go to the ZMAN.com, and that's the easiest place. All my stuff is there, links to everything, and you can even send me money there. Since we're talking about shilling, because look, I don't sell meat buckets. Is that what Tim Pool sells? Meat buckets? Is that what they are?
I don't know that people used to do. Didn't people like Alex Jones sell something to help your brain or something? And
oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then my favorite is Mike Cernovich. He would shill anything. Didn't he have like the gorilla juice or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? There's an idea. This year, I'll put on my goal list. I'm going to come up with. You can buy the ZMAN Power Brain Hour or something. I don't know. I'll come up with something. It'll be a placebo that you take, and
Follow Z-Man though. He's a lot of fun, and I read him every day. And we will definitely be back next week, and we will take your questions. And if you have questions during the week, just submit them on Power Chat and just say, hey, this is for the Wednesday show, and I will save them up so they can kind of stack up. But we will come up with a topic, and you guys can help us with a topic. So Z-Man, it was a great show. This is a crazy time. I'm sure before the year's out, we're going to circle back to all this, what's happening, because it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but it's going to be crazy with Trump. It's never boring with Trump. I hate the phrase content creator. You're never bored with things. There's never a lack of things to talk about with Trump. I mean, that guy just delivers.
It's been a fun 10 years.
Yeah. And thank you guys all here. We're just over 1,013. So it's great to have you guys here, and we will see you next week. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.